A climber is working up a wall of limestone in the Grand Canyon, hundreds of feet up, with no handholds worth the name. The red wall is the hardest rock in the canyon to climb. Above him is a cave mouth he has no business reaching. He gets in. And on the floor of a cave nobody ever lived in, under a small cairn of flat stones, is a tiny animal made from a single split willow twig, folded into a deer, with a miniature spear driven through it. It is 4,000 years old. Somebody climbed that wall to leave it there, and climbed back down. Before that, a hole in the ground that breathes, a town its own neighbors came for in the night, and a village that lasted one human lifetime. Arizona is one of the most excavated states in America. These 10 ancient places are the ones the digging never solved and no one can explain. Number 10. The hole that breathes. Start 30 miles northeast of Flagstaff, at a pueblo called Wupatki, and put your hand over a crack in the ground about the width of a dinner plate. On a hot afternoon, cold air comes out hard enough to lift a hat. When the temperature outside drops, the flow reverses and the ground pulls air back down. Locals call it the blowhole. The Hopi, descended from the people who lived here, call it the breath of Yaponsa, the wind spirit. Stand over it in July and the desert exhales on you, cold, from somewhere you cannot see. Where is all that air coming from? Researchers measured the flow and used it to estimate the void it connects to, and the number they got back is 7 billion cubic feet. That is a tunnel 165 feet square running 50 miles. In the 1960s, teams released chemical tracers into these cracks, and they came out of other blowholes 25 miles away. What puts it on this list is what was built around it. The people of Wupatki raised a pueblo here, and beside it a ball court, and the blowhole sits between them. Somebody looked at a crack in the ground that exhales and decided a town went there. A town arranged around a hole that exhales. Now a town arranged around a hole that swallows. Number 9. The town with catacombs. Now go east, to the White Mountains near Springerville, and to a site that does something no other pueblo in Arizona does. Casa Malpai was built on basalt terraces around 1250 by the Mogollon, and it comes with the expected features: 50 to 60 rooms, a great kiva, a solar calendar. What it also has is a hole in the ground leading into the lava. The basalt here is fractured, and beneath the town are natural fissures and chambers. The builders used them. Human remains were placed in those spaces and sealed in, which is why the site is described as having catacombs. Think about what that means day to day. You cook, sleep, argue, and raise children on a floor, and your grandparents are directly beneath it, in the dark, in the rock. Then there is the staircase, cut into the cliff, wide and formal, rising in a way that suggests procession rather than convenience. And here is how the question was closed. After the excavations of the early 1990s, Springerville agreed to seal the catacombs, with prayers and offerings by Hopi and Zuni spiritual leaders. They are not on the tour. They will not be reopened. The only catacombs known in the prehistoric American West have been shut, deliberately, out of respect for the people in them. And why this community alone chose the lava beneath its feet as the address for its dead is now a question with a permanent lid on it. Had you heard of it before tonight? Tell us in the comments. Casa Malpai put its dead below and marked the solstice on rock. The next site did the second part and nothing else, and did it better than anywhere in the region. Number 8. The calendar on the rock. In the Verde Valley, on a sandstone panel above a creek, there are more than 1,000 petroglyphs, and a few of them are a machine. This is the V-bar-V site, 1,032 petroglyphs on 4 panels, the largest collection in the Verde Valley, made by the Sinagua. Most is what you would expect: animals, human figures, spirals, abstract designs. Which of 1,000 carvings actually matter? It was a volunteer guide at the site who noticed something about a handful of them, and about the rocks above. At certain times of year, sunlight passing a gap in the cliff, and past stones wedged deliberately into a crevice, throws blades of shadow down the panel that touch specific carvings on specific days. A year-long survey beginning in 2005 tracked them, and they cluster around the solstices, the equinoxes, and planting times. Now the honest part. Some claimed alignments at rock art sites do not hold up, and the field has a history of finding what it goes looking for. But the V-bar-V effects happen on schedule, and people drive out to watch them. What is not in doubt is that the people who made this panel understood the geometry of the cliff extremely well. And here is the proportion that should bother you. Of 1,032 carvings on that bluff, exactly 11 are part of the calendar. We can talk for an hour about those 11. About the other 1,021, we have almost nothing. A cliff that tells a farmer when to plant. Now a village with a construction date, an occupation, and an end, all readable in its own timber. Number 7. The village that lasted one lifetime. In northern Arizona, in a canyon on Navajo land, there is an alcove in a cliff with a village inside it, and this one comes with a calendar attached. Betatakin sits in a sandstone alcove 450 feet high, about 120 rooms under an overhang so large the village looks like a model of itself. How precisely can you date a building nobody wrote about? In dry country with preserved beams, precisely enough to read it like a construction diary. The wood tells us timbers were stockpiled between 1269 and 1272, that the main burst of building came in 1275 to 1277 as a whole group arrived at once, that the last construction was 1286, and that the alcove stood empty by 1300. That is roughly one human lifetime. Somebody could have been born in that alcove, raised children under that arch, and lived long enough to watch the last family carry their things down the slope. And here is what makes it strange rather than sad. They did not build it gradually. The beams were cut and seasoned years before the walls went up, which means people arrived knowing they were going to build a town in a cliff. Then the whole region cleared out. The great migrations of the late 1200s carried these communities south and east, toward the Hopi Mesas and the Rio Grande, and their descendants are there now. The move itself is not a mystery, the timing is. Why build a village this carefully in a place you will leave before the roof beams need replacing? Betatakin was built fast and left standing. So what makes 100 communities move at once and pay for it in water every day of their lives? Number 6. The towns built where there is no water. North of Phoenix, on the black basalt mesas above the Agua Fria River, there are pueblos with a design problem. They sit on the rims and high points, defensible ground, with clear lines of sight between them. Some have perimeter walls, restricted entries, and viewing slits. Over 450 structures have been recorded here, occupied between about 1250 and 1450, with perhaps 3,000 people living in villages scattered across the mesa. And here is the flaw a modern planner would flag immediately. They are a long way from water. The river runs hundreds of feet below, and the mesa tops are dry. Every drop drunk in those villages was carried up, in pottery jars, from a creek that is a steep hike below. The land agency that manages the site says it plainly. The location was chosen not for the convenience of the people hauling water, but for the view. So what makes a family choose thirst over convenience every day for a lifetime? Nobody builds a town like that for the view. The general reading is defense, that people concentrated on high, hard ground during a period of stress and conflict, banding together for safety and paying for it in labor, every single day, in water. But the threat itself is where the trail goes cold. There is evidence of conflict in the wider region, and burned rooms elsewhere. What these mesas lack is a written account, a named enemy, or a battle anybody can point to. Hundreds of structures went up on hard ground, and the reason survives only as a shape on a map. Quick pause at the halfway mark. If 100 towns moving uphill for a reason nobody wrote down is the kind of story you came for, hit the like button. It costs you nothing, and it decides whether anybody else ever sees this. And subscribe if you want me to keep going looking. Those villages feared an enemy they never named. Awatovi knew exactly who came for it. Number 5. The town that was destroyed from within. We know who did this, and we know when. What nobody can explain is why, and it is the darkest entry on this list. Awatovi stood on Antelope Mesa in Hopi country, occupied for centuries, and in the 1600s the Spanish planted a mission there. In 1680, the Pueblo revolt drove them out of the region entirely. 12 years later they came back, and Awatovi, alone among the Hopi towns, accepted the Franciscans again. And then the question this entry cannot answer. What does a village have to do for its own world to end it? Around 1700, the other Hopi villages destroyed Awatovi. And in Hopi oral tradition, the man who arranged it was Awatovi's own chief, who had watched what the mission was doing to his town and went to the neighboring villages himself. By the accounts that survive, men from neighboring towns came in at night, while the men of Awatovi were gathered inside a kiva. The ladders were pulled out. The village burned, and its population was largely killed or taken away, with some of the women and children distributed among other towns. Awatovi was never resettled, and it is not resettled now. Walk Antelope Mesa today, and you are walking on a town that its own world decided should stop existing. Historians can give you the sequence. The decision is another matter, because the surviving accounts come from sources with different agendas, and the Hopi hold their own history of it, some of which is not shared outside the community. This is not an unsolved case waiting for an archaeologist. It is a wound in a living nation's history, 300 years old, and the people who understand it best owe us nothing. One town was ended by its neighbors. Now, 200 places built for the opposite reason. Number 4. 200 ball courts. Scattered across central and southern Arizona are large oval depressions in the ground, dug out, banked with earth, sometimes 40 meters long. At least 200 have been recorded across the state, and they belong to the Hohokam. What do you do in a hole in the ground 200 times over? They look like ball courts, and that is what everyone calls them, because they resemble the ball courts of Mesoamerica, where the rubber ball game ran for 1,000 years and sometimes ended with a player's death. Rubber balls have turned up in Arizona, carried north along the same routes that brought macaws and copper bells. The connection is real. But the Arizona courts are not Mexican courts. They are shaped differently, built differently, and spread across farming villages of a culture with no cities in the Mesoamerican sense. Some researchers argue they were not primarily for a game at all, but gathering places. Neutral ground where scattered communities came to trade, arrange marriages, and settle things, with the court as the venue rather than the point. Then, after about 1100, the Hohokam stopped using them. Many were filled in with trash, and platform mounds went up instead, raised, restricted, walled spaces that appear to be about keeping people out rather than bringing them in. Whatever happened in those ovals, an entire society did it for centuries, then deliberately switched to something with the opposite architecture. That change is one of the biggest open turns in southwestern archaeology, and its cause is still being argued over. Which of tonight's places would you want to stand in at sunrise? Tell us in the comments, and stay put, because number 1 is that cave from the top of this video. The Hohokam dug 200 ovals to bring people together. They also dug something that made the desert habitable in the first place. Number 3, the river they moved. Underneath modern Phoenix is a network of canals, and it is not small. The Hohokam dug hundreds of miles of them, drawing water off the Salt and Gila rivers and running it across the valley to irrigate tens of thousands of acres. Some main channels were wide and deep enough to take a small boat. They did it with stone, wood, and baskets. No metal tools, no draft animals, no wheel. How do you level a desert without a level? The surveying is the part that stops engineers. A canal has to fall gently and consistently over enormous distances. Too steep and it scours itself apart, too flat and it silts up and dies. They held those gradients across miles of open ground with no instruments we know of, no writing, and no way to record a measurement except in a person's head and in the training of the next generation. The system ran for 1,000 years. It supported the largest population in the ancient Southwest, in a place that gets under 8 inches of rain a year. And when Phoenix was being built, canal companies in the 1800s found the old alignments so good they cleaned out and reused the ancient channels. That is the highest compliment engineering ever gets. The next civilization saved time by using yours. Then, in the 1400s, it came apart. Floods tearing out the headgates, drought, salt building in the soil, and social strain have all been proposed. The canals silted, the towns emptied, and the people dispersed into the communities the O'odham and other nations descend from today. Hundreds of miles of canal, and almost none of it visible today. Number 2 is the one Hohokam building you can still walk up to. Number 2, the house with the holes in the walls. An hour southeast of Phoenix, under a steel canopy the government built to protect it, stands a 4-story building made of mud. Casa Grande went up around 1350, and it is an outlier. The Hohokam built with adobe and caliche all over southern Arizona, but they did not build towers, and nothing else like this. The walls at the base are more than a meter thick, packed course by course out of caliche, and they have stood in the open for nearly 7 centuries. So what is it? Astronomical observatory? Chief's residence? Ceremonial building? Granary? Administrative center? Every one of those has been argued in print, and every one is still an argument. And here is the detail that keeps the argument alive. Set into the upper walls are openings that are not doorways or ordinary windows. Some line up with the setting sun at the summer solstice, some with the equinox sunrise, and one with a lunar event that comes round every 18.6 years. The Hohokam left no writing, so intent is out of reach. But this is a culture that held canal gradients across miles of open ground for 1,000 years. Betting they could not aim a hole in a wall seems like the weaker bet. A mud tower that may aim at the solstice, built by people who left no writing. Now something older than all of it, and smaller than your hand. Number 1. The things in the caves. Since 1933, when the first ones were recognized, more than 400 split-twig figurines have been recovered from over 30 sites in the Southwest, and the Grand Canyon ones are their own distinct style. Each is made from a single twig, usually willow, split most of its length and folded into the body and legs of an animal, most often a bighorn sheep or a deer. Some are pierced with a second stick, like a spear. Some are stuffed with the dung of the animal they represent. Radiocarbon puts them between 2,000 and 4,000 years old, and the practice ran for about 17 centuries. So what would make you climb a cliff to leave a toy in the dark? Here are the 4 facts that make this number 1. They are only in caves nobody lived in. No hearths, no trash, no tools, no sign of habitation. They are placed, not dropped. Each one sits under a flat rock or a small cairn of stones, at the back, in the dark, which means that before anybody left a figurine, they built something to put it under. These are the smallest structures on this list, and the stones for them were hauled up a cliff by hand. The caves are savage to reach. They are in the Redwall limestone, and the Park Service prohibits exploring them, partly because there are certainly more figurines still in there. And the caves have something in common. They hold the bones of Ice Age animals, long extinct by the time anybody made a figurine. Picture the whole act. You cut a willow twig by a river. You walk into the biggest hole in North America. You climb a cliff that will kill you if you are careless, into a cave full of the bones of animals nobody alive has ever seen. You put a model of a deer with a spear in it under a stone at the back, and you climb out and go home, and your descendants keep doing it for 1,700 years. The best explanation we have is hunting ritual. It is a reasonable guess, and it is also 2 words doing the work of an entire missing religion. There are caves in the Redwall right now with figurines still under the stones, and the Park Service will not let anyone go in. Everyone agrees more are in there. Nobody is allowed to look. So should those caves be opened and the figurines brought out, cataloged, dated, put behind glass where the rest of us can finally see them? Or should they be left exactly where somebody placed them 4,000 years ago and never touched again? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked watching this video, consider subscribing to the channel and pushing the like button. I'll see you in the next one.